everyone, welcome back to Cinecosma. Let's talk about Cancer today. On the screen, I have some general facts. I think that it's important to know at least the basics about Cancer before you are able to articulate and kind of pinpoint what you're looking at when you're watching a movie or when you're watching a TV series. And in order to know what you're looking at, you need to know about the Cancer archetype. So at the top where you see like season, ruling planet, element, you can take a quick look at those. I'm not going to really discuss those because they're not going to play much of a role in this particular series, but knowing even those basic facts will still be important just in general. So feel free to take a look at that and kind of make a mental note. But what I want to discuss is the keywords and the common challenges, and you can see those both highlighted on the screen. These keywords are words that like just quickly summarize the Cancer zodiac sign in a few words. So let's get into some keywords. I'm just going to go down the list, starting with home, origins, nurture, family, protection, nostalgia, and bonding. There's a reason why these words all closely align with Cancer, and you'll see how and why later throughout the video. And then we have common challenges: dependency, emotional withdrawal, overprotection, hoarding, secrecy, and possessiveness. So essentially, the opposite extreme version of a lot of the keywords that I just listed off is also what can become the challenge. So now let me get to the next slide. And this is what I'm going to explain to you guys today: Cancer in storytelling. The ultimate question that I'm asking is, how does the Cancer archetype show up on screen thematically, right? So I just gave you these keywords and facts about Cancer. Now we're going to see how these words and challenges and facts play out on screen. So, common story themes that align with Cancer archetype. So if you remember, I just showed you the slides with Cancer themes, but now on this slide, I'm showing you actual storytelling themes. So these are literal words that might be used. If you've ever taken a film class or something before, I have. I went to school for film or a film equivalent program. If you've ever went to school and taken a film class, you might have watched a movie or something and then have been asked, what do you think this story was about? What do you think the theme of this movie or TV show was? You'd probably come up with some of these words. Oh, this was a story about family. This is a story about figuring out where home is, and etc. like that. So let's look at some of these common story themes. Family. I just told you that family is one of the key words that aligns with Cancer. One of the common story themes that you might see is family. Who are my people? Is it blood family or is it found family? There's plenty of movies and TV shows that essentially fall under this particular theme. And like I said, I'll give examples. But family is a common story theme that you'll see a lot when you're watching a TV show or when you're watching a movie. Essentially, the theme here is, who is this character's family? Typically, it will surround the protagonist, and it's usually the protagonist who's trying to figure out, who are my people? Is it my blood family or is it my found family? Then next we have home. Now I get that the word itself is pretty vague. Home essentially is, where do I belong? What is like my safe haven and sanctuary, and just essentially what feels like home. So again, think about a story, a movie or TV show that you've seen, and the characters trying to figure out where they belong. That's essentially trying to figure out what home is to this character. They're trying to figure out what is a safe haven, a safe space for them, and or what feels like home. Then we have the third theme, and again, there's a total of 5 on this graphic, as you can see, but it's not limited to 5, but I can't spend a whole video doing all the themes, lol. But next we have emotional ties. So emotional ties, this one for me was challenging to find proper stories about it, because it's like very specific, almost to the point where it's like, okay, are there any stories that actually specifically fall under this theme of emotional ties? But I actually was able to find what I think aligns with emotional ties. And so, anyways, emotional ties is essentially asking the question, what or who am I bonded to? One thing you'll know about the Cancer, you'll come to learn about the Cancer archetype, if you didn't already know this, is that Cancer is a very emotional sign, and they can bond and latch on to people very tightly, especially if there's emotional connection there. So, what or who am I bonded to? What is the emotional attachment to people, places, or things that the character has? And I know that this might sound like a kind of interesting story theme, because it's not really a word that is commonly used, I guess, in terms of like people actually saying it, but you'll come to realize that it is a common story theme. At least I think so. Obviously, everything on this brand is, what I think, but I feel like you'll come to realize that emotional ties, even if you don't use that verbiage, is actually pretty common in a lot of stories. And once I give you guys some examples with actual movies and TV shows, hopefully you'll be able to see what I mean. But number 4 is protection. Who do I care for? This is guardian figures, this is sacrificial love, this is caregiving and nurturing. So, again, I said this earlier, Cancer is a very protective sign, very protective over the people that they love. And it's also not just about who I care for. You can also look at it as who cares for me too. Cancer also wants that reciprocation. So sometimes you might, look at a protagonist who's trying to search for someone who can care for them just as much as they care for other people, right? Typically, your guardian figures are supposed to be people who care for you, and that can lean into caring for you to the point where they're willing to sacrifice themselves, give you care, and nurture you. And then last but certainly not least is the past. Who or what came before me? So this includes your origins. Includes your history, whether it's your own personal history or just history in general, history of the world, history of your country, wherever you live. It's also your bloodline and ancestry. Obviously, everyone has origins. Everyone has somewhere where their bloodline started. And then it's also cultural identity and traditions. Through history and through your ancestry, culture and traditions are built, and that's part of what even makes culture, and that is a huge part in everyone's history and ancestry and bloodline. So that still falls under Cancerian territory. And then I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little blurb at the very bottom. I made it small so it wasn't so distracting, but I guess I probably could have made it a little bigger. But it says, themes often overlap and can appear through both harmonious and challenging expressions. What I mean by that is, oftentimes when you watch a story and you're looking out for these themes, you're probably not going to see just one. Like, you're probably not going to see a story that's just about family, but also doesn't include home or emotional ties. So understand that a lot of these stories, especially the examples I'm going to give, can spill into other categories. I know I have them split into 5 different main themes, but at majority of the time, at least 2 are present in a story. So don't think that like only a story can only have one of these. They might typically have at least 2 of them. Like family and home tend to always kind of go together in these stories. Family and protection always tend to go together in these stories. You naturally protect your family. It's just, a natural reaction. So just keep that in mind as I'm going through these examples, that even though I have them specifically under categories, you might listen and be like, oh, well, actually, I think this movie falls under this theme. Honestly, they all can you can make a case for all of them, for all the themes listed here on the screen, and even some that I haven't listed, you can make a case for all of them. So this is not like a concrete list that can't have any flexibility. I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. And then I also said that these themes can appear through both harmonious and challenging expressions. What I mean by that is, right now, I have them listed as neutral in the sense that this isn't showing you if this is a good or a bad thing, or I don't really like to use good or bad when it comes to astrology, more so just like harmonious and challenging, right? So, going back to what I was saying earlier about protection, the harmonious aspect of protection is when you protect someone that you love in a healthy way, but then the challenging aspect of protection is when it becomes overprotection. Then that's where it can become challenging because sometimes you might genuinely love someone to the point where you just are like, I have to protect you. Like, I have to protect you from the world. I have to protect you from this. I have to protect you from that, to the point where it can become smothering and you don't allow that person to breathe and to live. So that's where it can become challenging. So that's what I mean when I say harmonious and challenging. And again, I'll explain that with examples, which I'm about to do right now. So let's get into some story examples. Starting with family, I have four different examples on the screen. I'm sure at least one of these is familiar to you. I have Medea's Big Happy Family, The Haunting of Hill House, Full House, and The Cosby Show. And as you can see, it's double-sided. So there's the part with the black background and it says challenging expression. And then there's the white background and it says harmonious expression. And so this is what I was talking about when I was saying challenging expression and harmonious expression. And let me explain what this means. So let's look at the challenging expression really quick on the left side. The two examples that I chose, these aren't the only examples, but these are just two that I felt like fit this example. Medea's Big Happy Family and The Haunting of Hill House. In both of these stories, ultimately, we're seeing a challenging expression of family. These two stories aren't necessarily lovey-dovey. At least that's not how they start. They don't start out lovey-dovey. The conflict in each of these stories is family. I'm not going to necessarily go into detail with all these stories. I have multiple slides and they each all have four, so I can't spend too much time explaining each individual story. So these are four stories for both. These are TV shows and movies. Three of them are shows, one of them is a movie. You have something to watch on your watch list. Go watch it and then come back to this video if you need, like, an understanding of what these shows are about, because I cannot spend too much time going into detail, right? But to summarize, Medea's Big Happy Family is essentially about a dying mother who reunites her broken family. So her family was already broken prior to her dying. She in the movie she has cancer, so she's getting sick, but that right there is what ultimately brings her family together, right? So for the first, like, I don't remember how long the movie is. I have seen Medea's Big Happy Family. I just don't remember how long it is. But essentially for the entire movie, we're seeing this family fight with each other. We're seeing secrets that are being revealed that have hurt people, and we're seeing them hurt each other until they all realize we have bigger problems, and those bigger problems is the fact that their mother is dying, and that alone is, unfortunately, I mean, it's unfortunately for their mom, but that right there is what was able to have them come together. So that is why I put this under the challenging expression part, because this movie is ultimately showing you what essentially a toxic family looks like. You know what I'm saying? Family isn't always lovey-dovey. As I said, family can be toxic. And so this is an example of a toxic family. Now, again, it did end on a happy note, which is, that happens. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you have a toxic family and then you learn to love each other. Other times you have a toxic family and you still end up with a toxic family. So this is just an example of a story that starts out challenging, but then ends up harmonious. And as you see, in between the challenging expression and harmonious expression text, I have an arrow, and that arrow is there on purpose to show that they can move from challenging to harmonious, or even harmonious to challenging. So they don't have to necessarily stay challenging or stay harmonious. They can move back and forth. Medea's Big Happy Family is an example of a movie that starts challenging and then moves to harmonious. So again, this is to me representing Cancer because it's literally about a family. I mean, family is literally in the title. Medea's big happy family, right? So it's about a family that starts off challenging, again, toxic, but then it ends off harmonious. And then next we have The Haunting of Hill House. I have seen The Haunting of Hill House. I just haven't seen it in a while, so I don't remember 100% what went down. I remember like bits and pieces, but ultimately, to summarize, The Haunting of Hill House is essentially about a family's buried trauma that follows them into adulthood. It is considered a something like basically like a horror TV show. And also keep in mind that genre doesn't matter. You can have a story about a family and it could be a comedy genre, it could be horror genre, it could be family genre, it could be animation. It doesn't matter what the genre is. What matters is the theme that is being explored, right? So already you have two different examples. The Haunting of Hill House is a horror series. Medea's Big Happy Family is a drama movie. So, two different genres, two completely different vibes, but the ultimate theme is still surrounding family. So, going back to The Haunting of Hill House, a family has buried trauma and it literally follows them into adulthood. And when I say literally, I mean there's ghosts, there's characters who have visions of the past, and on the top side, they're adults. On the bottom side, they're children. So even just looking at the poster alone, that can already give you some vibes that we're about to see a story that follows a family, something that follows a family from when they were children up until they're adults. Then we have on the harmonious side. Here are two examples. Full House and The Cosby Show. Full House is a fun, feel good family TV show. It is essentially about a family that gets closer after loss. So, Full House essentially follows the Tanner family and the father, who is Tanner, sorry. The father, who is Danny Tanner. Oh my God, Tanner. It's Tanner. Um, the father lost his wife. He has three girls. Well, technically, he has four girls because one is twins. So he has four girls, and essentially, Full House is a story that just follows this family without, the mother in the household. Now, there are mother figures in the household. The mother or the wife, she's already passed away by the time of the first episode. So that part obviously is sad, but otherwise the rest of the TV show, it's just supposed to be feel good, a little bit of comedy, and you're just supposed to see this family and their day-to-day lives essentially. And then next we have The Cosby Show. And this is a story that has both the mother and the father in the house. The Cosbys are a middle class family living in New York, and again, it's essentially just it's a feel good TV show. It's a family helps each other through life's challenges. All of the kids and the husbands and wife, they go through just your everyday family conflicts, and that's what this TV show shows. And even in Full House as well. Well, all of these have conflict, obviously. No, even harmonious doesn't mean without conflict. It just means overall it is a positive expression of the Cancer archetype. So that's essentially family. Let's move on to the next term, which is home. Home is where the heart is, as they say. And so again, two harmonious expressions, two challenging expressions, just like the last slide. So starting with harmonious expression, we have Extreme Makeover Home Edition. You see the word home literally in the title. And then we have The Blind Side. So these are actually two different examples of home in itself, right? So starting with Extreme Home Makeover, this is essentially a TV show. This ran in the early 2000s. I used to watch it. I was a kid when I watched this, and I love this TV show. But it is essentially a TV show that where this man seeks out families who are in need of a home, and he builds it for them. And we're just essentially not by himself, but we're essentially watching new homes being built for families that need a fresh start and that are in need of a new home. And what makes this connect to Cancer is, even though, yes, we're seeing a huge portion of the homes actually literally being built on camera, the overall theme of this is the family portion of it. We're seeing what the home does to the family. In a lot of these episodes, which I haven't seen this in a long time, I don't even think this airs anymore. But essentially, in this TV show, every family we get to hear about them. It's like they're being interviewed at the same time, and so they are, sharing with us what their struggles are, and we're seeing them come together as a family, and now they're just being given a home. So this is why I feel like this connects to Cancer, because underneath the fact that we're watching a huge portion of the home being built, we're seeing what makes a home a home. A home isn't just the physical building. It's not just, the four walls. It is the people that make it a home. And so we get to really be involved a lot in the lives of these families, at least the portion that they're showing on the series. And so next we have The Blind Side, which is a completely different vibe. I still think it connects to home, but it's a completely different vibe than Extreme Makeover Home Edition. So essentially, The Blind Side is a story about a family who gives a boy a place to belong. Again, you could argue that this connects to family as well, but you could also say that it connects to home, because essentially what you're seeing here is a football player who was homeless and a football player who was in need of a home. And Sandra Bullock, I forget her name in the movie, but the character playing her, Sandra Bullock, takes him in, and then he goes off to become, like, a football player. And so this is another example of home where you don't have a place to belong, and then now you find it. In Extreme Makeover Home Edition, the family didn't have a place to belong. Like, it was the entire family, at least the family that they, presented themselves as on the TV show. Whereas in The Blind Side, it's one individual who's entering a home that is already established, and yet it's still the same theme underneath. It's where do I belong and finding a place to call home. And so those are just two examples that I think are harmonious expressions of home. But now let's get into the challenging expressions of home. This one was a little bit tricky because, again, if you remember what I said about the arrows, in a lot of these stories, that some of them start out challenging and then move harmonious. Some of them start harmonious and then move challenging. So I wanted to really try to find examples that I feel like, okay, the overall conflict starts challenging, even if the movie itself moves into harmonious by the end, right? So these are two examples, in my opinions, that starts out challenging, but then overall eventually becomes harmonious. So for starters, we have The Cat in the Hat. Completely different vibe from The Blind Side, completely different vibe from Extreme Makeover Home Edition. But again, like I said, genre doesn't matter. Aesthetics and visuals don't matter. What is the theme underneath? So for The Cat in the Hat, home is still the theme of it, even though it is literally chaotic on the surface, right? So essentially, The Cat in the Hat is about a work pulling a mother away from her home. So in The Cat in the Hat, there's a mom and two kids, a boy and a girl, and she just essentially can't make time for them because she just has a lot of work responsibilities. And so her two kids have to stay home alone. They do have a babysitter, but even the babysitter is just not really doing much. The babysitter sleeps all day and whatever. And so essentially the story is just a very chaotic way of showing what it looks like when parents, and essentially specifically mother, because the mom is technically a single parent who's working. And so she has to step away from home constantly and just can't really make time for her kids. And so in The Cat in the Hat, essentially, the two kids, they're home alone until the Cat in the Hat shows up, and then he just takes them on a wild, chaotic day. That's how it starts, and that's essentially like the bulk of the movie. And then it ends up being harmonious. The mom chooses to spend more time with the kids, right? But underneath it, the reason why this is a challenging expression is because it's showing what happens when, you, like, a home, like I said before, isn't just the building itself, the physical building. It's the people inside of it and the emotional connections within it. And the two children were feeling a little disconnected from their mom. That is why I put it under challenging expression. And then next we have The Croods, another family children's movie. The Croods is essentially a family is forced to leave the only home they've ever known. The Croods, if I remember correctly, I haven't seen it in a while, but it takes place like in early human days. The Croods are essentially like early humans. They're early humans and they live like, outside. If I remember correctly, their home was their original home where they were living got destroyed to the point where they had to essentially migrate. And we're watching this particular family do that. There's a father figure. He's like obviously again the head of the household, the head of the family. And so we're just kind of seeing like what this family does, having to migrate from their home while also juggling being teenagers. And so again, I put that under challenging expression. All right, let's move on to the next example, emotional ties. I think I said this earlier. This one was difficult for me to find really good examples, but I think I did find some good ones. We have two examples of challenging expression and two examples of harmonious expression. Up is essentially about a widowed husband who clings to his house that represents his wife. So his wife died, and the house itself has become like something that he's built a huge attachment to, almost so to the point where, as you can even see in the poster, he takes the house with him. He what essentially the movie is about him going on an adventure that his wife wanted to go. There's this location, I think it's called like Paradise Falls or something like that, that his wife always wanted to go to, but she never got to go because she passed away. And so he decided that I'm gonna go on this adventure for my wife. Like that is how strong the emotional ties is to his wife and all the things inside of it, the family photos, certain objects. This is an example of like a challenging expression. He doesn't need to be so attached to the material things such as the home itself and all the things within the home. Then we have Monster House, which is similar. A deceased wife's spirit clings to her home to remain connected to husband. So again, in both of these stories, the wife has died. In Monster House, the husband is extremely protective of his property, extremely protective of the house, because the wife's spirit literally manifested into the house. And I don't really know how to explain it. You're going to have to just go watch Monster House if you haven't seen it. But essentially, the house is now the wife. The house is now the wife. She is literally, her spirit has literally manifested into turning the house into a living, breathing entity. And the husband essentially is safeguarding it and protecting it. So he's very, very strict about people being on his property. He does not have guests. He doesn't even really want you in front of his house. If you touch even an inch of grass on his lawn, he goes ballistic. So this is another example of a challenging expression of Cancer, because he is extremely attached. And to be honest, it's not even really the husband, it's really the wife. She can't seem to let go, because the bond between her and the husband were so strong. She can't really seem to let go, and the husband can't really let her go. Like he doesn't want to, out of just sadness for her and his love for her, and she is very protective of him and the house that they've built together. And so neither one of them is letting go, essentially. And so it's funny because in both stories, Up and Monster House, they both revolve around a house. Up is a little bit more of a feel-good story, even though it's a challenging expression of Cancer. It's still more feel-good and funny and comedy. Monster House is a little bit more in the dark end. It's more of a children's horror type of story. Actually, I don't even know if it's children's genre, but either way, challenging expression. Next, let's move into harmonious expression of emotional ties. Finding stories that specifically fall under this title, it's not really like a lot of stories don't specifically say like, oh, this is going to be a theme and the theme is emotional ties. Sometimes you have to read between the lines and kind of connect it. So I might have reached a little bit when I put these two stories as examples of emotional ties on a harmonious end, but in my mind they still work, right? So the first example is Hachi, A Dog's Tale. I've actually never seen this before. But it is essentially about, from what I've learned and from what I've studied. I am going to watch it though, it's on my watch list. But from what I've learned about it, it's essentially the bond between a dog and its owner lasts a lifetime. There's this dog here, and his owner passed away, and we're essentially seeing how the dog still keeps essentially his owner's spirit alive. And so I think this is a harmonious expression of emotional ties because it's obviously not toxic. And we're seeing how the dog specifically is still bonded with his owner even following after following his death. And I think that's still healthy. There's nothing wrong with still being bonded to someone who has passed away. It just depends. I think where it becomes challenging is how you move through the world now. For example, in Up, he became so bonded with his wife that he just isolated himself. He stayed in his house. He was even a little bit grumpy, didn't really want to talk to anyone, didn't want to open up, things like that. Same thing with Monster House. And I think that's what makes it challenging. But in heart, it's hard. Where it can become harmonious is when you can still keep the love alive, but still allow yourself to go out and live. And then Toy Story is also another example. A child's favorite toys become lifelong companion. There's currently 5 movies in the franchise. The one that you see is just Toy Story 1, but they all kind of all 5 of them have a similar underlying theme, and that is the fact that a child's favorite toys become lifelong companions. Again, I think this is harmonious because just because you're older doesn't mean you have to toss them. You know what I'm saying? You can still keep them. If anything, the toys feel more neglected than anything, because if you know, in Toy Story, the toys come alive. Like, we're watching the toys more than we're watching the human. And so I think that this is again a harmonious expression of emotional ties. It's just the toys have a really good bond with the owner and vice versa, and it's healthy in my opinion. So this would be an example of a healthy emotional tie. We have protection. And so this is another theme that I feel like a strong theme for Cancer. Cancer is a very protective sign over the things, the people, the places that they love. So let's start off with the harmonious side. We have A Quiet Place Part 2 specifically, though I think it's the same across all the Quiet Places. They have about 3 or 4 out. It's also a franchise. And then we have 13 Ghosts. Funny enough, both of these stories are horror, but I actually think that horror is a really good example, especially when it comes to protection, because in most horror stories, people need to be protected. There's usually always a threat that is threatening over either one individual or multiple, like it could even be the whole town of people. And so protection naturally shows through when you're looking at a horror story, because typically people need to be protected, but there's a way that the protection plays out. So for example, in A Quiet Place Part 2, this is a story about protecting one another. This is a story about how protecting one another becomes the family's mission. Particularly in Quiet Place 2, we're watching this family learn to protect each other. If you haven't seen A Quiet Place, they have to be quiet, hence the name. There are monsters that react to noise, and then they'll come and unalive you if they hear you make noise. So the entire world in this movie, the world of this movie, everyone has to be quiet. And so we're seeing a mother protect her 3 kids while having to be completely silent. And she even has a baby. So she has to find a way to keep her baby silent. And so this is probably one of the ultimate acts of protection, especially when it involves a mother protecting her kids. If you know, like the mother bear phrase, and how they say like mother bears are very protective of her cubs, that's essentially what you're seeing in A Quiet Place Part 2. And so I think this is kind of like a pretty self-explanatory, harmonious expression. And then the next movie, 13 Ghosts, again, another horror story, completely different vibe than The Quiet Place, but still horror. This is a story about a father who risked his life to save his children. So again, a parent protecting their children. That's one of the things that's, when it comes to protection as it applies to Cancer, it's likely always going to be parents protecting their children, right? In Quiet Place, it's a mom protecting her children. In 13 Ghosts, it's a father protecting his children. In 13 Ghosts, the mom passes away like at the very beginning of the story. The father is literally faced with the decision of sacrificing himself. Luckily, him and his kids were able to make it out alive. I don't want to spoil it too much. I hope I haven't. But essentially, Go watch 13 Ghosts and you'll see what I mean. And so these are two examples of harmonious expressions of protection as it applies to Cancer. Now let's look at some challenging expressions. And I feel like these are some pretty good examples that I have on the screen. Starting with Carrie, the overall story has remained, and the different versions of Carrie, different directors have made different movies of Carrie. Carrie is a Stephen King story. It originally started out as a novel, or I believe a short story, either a short story or a novel. And now there's just like four, maybe like three or four different films called Carrie. They all have the similar story. It's just different characters, different settings, stuff like that, right? But essentially, Carrie is about a mother who shelters her daughter from the world. So in Carrie, the mom is extremely protective and she's extremely religious. And because of that, now she's overprotective of her daughter. She's afraid that her daughter is going to fall into sin if she does this, if she does that. She can't wear certain colors. She can't wear certain things. Her mom doesn't want her talking to certain people, doing certain things, all this stuff, right? And so this is a challenging expression of protection because the mom has become overprotective to the point where her daughter, not only does she feel like suffocated and can't really do much, but she can't even really protect herself because the mom is so protective that she doesn't really allow her daughter to experience life. And that becomes a problem in the movie because the daughter runs into some situations where if she would have had life experience, or even if her mom would have just simply taught her certain things, she would have been able to avoid it. But because the mom is extremely protective, even if it's coming from a good place, she's still being overprotective of her daughter, and it caused a huge mess. Let's just say that. Go watch Carrie. I've seen all the versions of Carrie. I love the story Carrie, so go watch it and you'll see what I mean. But overall, underneath all the horror and all the other stuff, it is a challenging expression of the Cancer archetype. This is an example of when a mother becomes overprotective. It doesn't have to be a mother, it can be anybody, but in this story, it is just a mother overprotective of her daughter, essentially, and sheltering her daughter. Then, last but not least, we have Mama. This is a story about a grieving mother's spirit who won't let go of her child. So essentially what happens in Mama is there's a family who is, okay, it's actually such a long story. Actually, it's not really that long, but it's kind of a confusing plot. So essentially there's a father who unalives his wife, tries to unalive his children, but he didn't succeed in it. So he takes his own life. And so essentially, the kids remain alive. And the kids, oh my God. So essentially, it's two girls. The father he took the life of the wife and then tried to unalive the two girls, but he failed at it. And so essentially, the two girls were lost in woods because the way that he tried to take their life was by crashing them. Well, I don't think he tried to crash them into a tree. I just think that it was an accident. Like they crashed into like a tree in like the forest. So the father dies. And then the two girls are left in the woods by themselves. And so they find this shack that was in the woods, and in this shack is a spirit. It's a mom, and she actually unalived her child, but this was like decades ago. And so her spirit has remained in that shack. And so when the two girls in the modern times, when the two girls came, she kind of became the mother to them. But whole time the father has a brother who has been looking for the two girls. And so once he actually finds the two girls, he takes them in. And so the spirit mother follows them because she's already built a bond and attachment to the girls, and vice versa too, because they are young. And so obviously, when a child is young, those are their most formative years. And so if they build an attachment to somebody that young, then it's kind of hard to break that attachment. So the mother's spirit essentially follows them to the brother's home and all that other stuff. And then it just becomes like a whole thing, right? So essentially there's a lot of different challenging expressions of Cancer going on here. We have, moms attached to children that aren't even theirs. You have children attached to moms that aren't even theirs. And then you have fathers who are trying to step up, fathers who are failing at being fathers. And then you have the brother trying to step up. So it's just a lot going on here. Very challenging expressions all around. And it's all the parents' fault. It's literally all the parents' fault. The children, they're children. They don't really have a say in this. They're just being bounced around from house to house, from guardian to guardian, because all the guardians are essentially failing them. Now, this is an example of a story. Actually, Carrie is too. These two are both examples of stories where it didn't necessarily end harmoniously. And I don't want to spoil why, so you're just gonna have to go watch it because I don't want to tell you why these stories didn't end harmoniously. But these are two examples of stories that start out challenging and in a way remain challenging. Go watch all these films, comment down below, and we can talk about it again. Let's move on to the next and final example. So this is the fifth theme that I had listed. Again, not the only one. There are way more themes than this, but I had to narrow it down to five. I already think I've already said too much anyways. And so we have the past. Let's start off with the challenging side. We have the others, and then we have Final Destination Bloodlines. Now, I haven't seen the others, but from what I've gathered about it, it is a story about a family's past that prevents them from moving on. Ghosts and everything are involved. I am gonna watch this movie. This is also on my list. But this is essentially about a story where a mom and she has kids. I believe she lost her husband, and because of that, she has remained attached to the home, and she just essentially won't let go because the past is she's allowing the past to dictate her present. But next we have Final Destination Bloodlines. Now I have seen this. Final Destination Bloodlines is a franchise. I believe Final Destination Bloodlines is movie number 5 or 6 in the franchise. And this one in particular is about bloodlines. And if you remember, that was, I believe that was one of the words that I put on the theme slide, that bloodlines connects to Cancer as well. And so this particular Final Destination installment follows a family. A family's bloodline inherits an unfinished fate. See, what happens is, if you know anything about the Final Destination movies, period, you know that it's essentially a franchise about death coming to unalive people who should have died in an accident. And in each different installment, it's a different accident. And so there's always at least one person who's psychic, and they're able to see the accident happen before it happens. And they eventually end up saving a few people. Did that make sense? They end up saving some people. And death essentially comes back and unalives them because they were all supposed to die in that accident. So in this particular movie, Final Destination Bloodlines, we're watching a family, a mother. Well, she's a grandmother in the movie, but she essentially has a vision about her and some other people dying, and because of her vision, she was able to stop it, at least stop her and a few other people from dying. And then she went on to have kids. She had a daughter, and then her daughter had kids. And so essentially now death is coming to essentially wipe out the whole family because the grandmother was initially supposed to die. That is essentially what Final Destination Bloodlines is. And this is also another example of a story that starts off challenging and remains challenging by the end of the story. And you'll see why if you go watch it. Let's move on to the harmonious expression, right? So the two examples that I gave, these are two completely different examples, but we have Malcolm X. This is a biopic. And then we have Ancient Civilizations, which is a documentary TV show. So Malcolm X is a story about a man who seeks to uncover his true ancestry. Again, it's a biopic, so Malcolm X is a real person, and he really did go by the name Malcolm X. This particular story is about him trying to figure out who he really is. And then Ancient Civilizations is a documentary trying to uncover forgotten history of human civilization. Malcolm X is a very it's an individual type of story where we're watching an individual trace and try to find his in history, whereas Ancient Civilizations is broad. The purpose is the same. I'm trying to figure out where we come from. In both stories, they are looking towards the past. So we are now at the end. In summary, family, home, emotional ties, protection, and the past are some of the most common themes associated with the Cancer archetype in astrology. The more of these themes a story explores, the stronger the case can be for interpreting it through a Cancer lens. Again, you're probably never really going to see these themes in isolation. At least two are always going to be present, and that's fine. That is all. Thank you for watching and sticking through the video. I have no idea how long this is or how long it's going to be. I'm going to have to edit. I know that for sure. But if you enjoyed this video, please follow and subscribe to join the Cinecosma universe. Stay tuned for a whole lot more videos to come. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.